transfer pricing for the first time, and she has some good experience in transfer pricing. So please cooperate and bear with us. Like if we miss out something, point it out. Through interactions only we will be able to make this presentation more worthwhile, right? So friends, please cooperate and interact as much as possible, and let us start. What we are going to do, that first I will be taking up the basic provisions of the law, Income Tax Act section 92C and rules, and then Kinjal will take us through various methods. I will it is very important for all of us, because we are a student of transfer pricing right now, so to know the law, how it is, the way it is. For that reason I have listed these sections and I am going to read line by line. You also read. These sections are given at the back side of the presentation, which is circulated to you. So you may also read from that, or you can note down or jot down whatever thoughts comes to your mind, any issues. We will discuss immediately also, or maybe at the later stage. So let us read the sections. This section 92C, computation of arm's length price. Now the provisions in the sections are made like 92C computation, 92D documentation. So very easy for us to remember. 92C is for computation of arm's length price. The subsection 1 reads like this: the arm's length price in relation to an international transaction and domestic transaction shall be determined by any of the following methods, being the most appropriate method, having regard to the nature of transaction, or class of transaction, or class of associated person, or functions performed by such persons, or such other relevant factors as the board may prescribe. So board has prescribed rule 10C, right? Board has prescribed rule 10C regarding the relevant factors, which we are going to discuss later on. And these various methods are being prescribed by this section. This CUP, resale price method, cost plus method, profit split method, transactional net margin method, such other method as may be prescribed by the board, which the board has prescribed under rule 10AB. Right? Now the subsection 2, the most appropriate method referred to in subsection 1 shall be applied for determination of arm's length price in the manner as may be prescribed. Again, rule 10B and 10AB are prescribed. Rule 10B gives various methods how is to be applied, and 10AB is other method, which is recently introduced. So this is 92C1 and 92C2 is very important. Then we will read the first proviso. Provided that where more than one price is determined by the most appropriate method, the arm's length price shall be taken to be the arithmetical means of such prices. So this is the latest position of first proviso. Then the second proviso, I have noted down, it's a tolerance and margin. It is called tolerance margin. Provided further that if the variation between the arm's length price so determined and price at which the international transaction or specified domestic transactions has actually been undertaken does not exceed such percentage, not exceeding 3% of the latter in this actual transfer price, not the ALP. So does not exceed 3% of the latter, or as may be notified by the central government in the official gazette in this behalf. The price at which the international transactions or SD transactions has actually been undertaken shall be deemed to be the arm's length price. So this is about tolerance margin has been provided that not more than 3% of the transfer pricing is a tolerance margin. Now this amendment has come through this Finance Act 2012 with retrospective effect from 1/4/2002. Right? Friends, I would like to, before I proceed to next section, I would like to inform the members that there was only one proviso prior to amendment which took place in 2009. Only one proviso was there, that I will read for you. provided that where more than one price is determined by the most appropriate method, the ALP shall be taken to be the arithmetical mean of such prices, or at the option of the assessee, a price which may vary from the arithmetical mean by an amount not exceeding 5% of such arithmetical mean. So this was the provision since 2001. So there was a 5% tolerance limit was given with respect to the arithmetical mean, which was an ALP, that is arithmetical mean, that is nothing but ALP, with respect to ALP. Now then the amendment came in 2009, and in 2009 this one proviso become two proviso, right? And then in 2012 there was in 2009 the amendment came that this prior to this amendment, this 5% margin was taken as a standard deduction, and various tribunals have ruled that this is to be treated as standard deductions, and then it is not like other way around. So then this amendment has come in 2009, and in 2009 it is made very clear this is not a standard deduction unless if there is a difference between the arithmetical mean and the actual transfer price is up to 5%, then one can accept the actual transfer price and not this ALP. But if it exceeds 5%, then that benefit is lost. It is not like standard deduction. So post 2009, this 5% standard deduction, then there is some special bench judgment also in one case, IHG IT Services, where with respect to this post amendment they have ruled special bench Delhi judgment. The standard, there is nothing like standard deduction anymore. Like the difference should not exceed 5%. If it exceeds 5%, then you are not entitled to this tolerance limit, right? So 92C2, this proviso ultimately became 2, and then in 2009 it was like the rates of this tolerance margin was not as may be prescribed by the central government, and in Finance Act 2012 made it not more than 3%. They have made it very clear, not more than 3%. And recently in last year CBDT has come out with a circular number 30, as per which this tolerance limits were specified for wholesale trading 1%, and other than wholesale trading 3%. Now what is wholesale trading is not defined, but we have to understand in our common parlance whatever is wholesale trading. So accordingly, this is the history of tolerance limit, right? So now we will go to next. Yeah. Now success.
In this tolerance limit, except under COP method, we benchmark like under TLM or on the basis of margin. So now say under TLM when we benchmark our profits, the arm's length price is 5%. Okay, and the price and the margin of the tested party, right? It is say 7%. So can we say that the difference of 2% is within the 3% tolerance that is provided under second provision?
I will take the help of Arun, because you have a practical experience. I don't have any practical experience, so please.
See, I think
if you can come over here, Arun, we are really feeling alone over here.
I thought I was comfortable here.
Please. No.
See, that percentage that we are talking about, it's not a difference between 5 and 7. If you look at, can you just go to the proviso? I'm audible, right? I don't need a mic. You go to the proviso. If you see this proviso, the proviso says that you have to compute a 5% from the arm's length price. It's not from the arm's length margin. So based on 5%, you have to compute the arm's length price. So let's say the sales are 100, the sales is 100, or the cost is 100, the margin, cost plus margin is 10%, so the sales will become 110. So 110, and then this is your arm's length margin rate of the market. And let's say your transaction price is 105 is your sales. So difference between 110 and 105, which is 5, should be less than 3% of 110. That is how this mechanism works. It's not a plain mechanism of 5 minus 7%. Clear?
Right. Thank you, Arun.
Right.
So this is all about tolerance limit. Now the limits is drastically brought down to 1% in case of wholesale trading and 3% in other cases. Subsection 2A again is introduced by Finance Act 2012. This is again, I'll just read, where the first proviso to subsection 2 as it stood before its amendment by the Finance Act 2009 is applicable in respect of an international transaction for an assessment year, and the variation between the arithmetical mean referred to in the said proviso and the price at which such transaction has actually been undertaken exceeds 5% of the arithmetical mean, then the assessee shall not be entitled to exercise the option as referred to in the said proviso, which was that special bench also held, and now this is in statute itself, that if the difference is more than 5%, then that benefit is not available at all. There is nothing like standard deduction anymore. Then this subsection 2B, nothing contained in subsection 2A shall empower the assessing officer either to assess or reassess under section 147 or pass an order enhancing the assessment or reducing a refund already made or otherwise increasing the liability of the assessee under section 154 for any assessment year, the proceeding of which have been completed before the first day of October 2009. So this is like authority from the assessing officer has been taken away to reopen the already assessed cases with respect to this tolerance limit. Now we'll go to subsection 3, where during the course of any proceeding for the assessment of income, the assessing officer is, on the basis of material or information or documents in his possession, or the opinion that, now this is danger zone. Danger zone in the sense now the powers are with the assessing officer. Now it's the turn of the assessing officer to recompute the arm's length price which is being computed by the assessee. So on the basis of material or information or documents in his possession, is of the opinion that the price charged or paid in an international transaction or specified domestic transaction has not been determined in accordance with subsection 1 and 2, or any information and document relating to an international transaction or SDT have not been kept and maintained by the assessee in accordance with the provisions containing subsection 1 of section 92D and the rules made in this behalf. Or the information or data used in computation of arm's length price is not reliable or correct, or the assessee has failed to furnish within the specified time any information or document which he was required to furnish by a notice issued under subsection 3 of section 92D. The assessing officer may proceed to determine the arm's length price in relation to the said international transactions or SDT in accordance with subsection 1 and 2 on the basis of such material or information or document available with him. So now the assessing officer is stepping in the shoes of the assessee and he himself starts computing the arm's length price, and that is why all these adjustments is taking place. So under subsection 3, the assessing officer gets power to recompute the arm's length price. Arun, I'm just reading these provisions, and if anything you would like to add, you can add, please. Okay.
So now I just wanted to ask, what is the implication of this provision? What do you think will happen out of this provision? We read this provision. What will happen out of this provision? What can the assessing officer do?
Can reject the price, can reject the comparable, can go to any extent you want.
So now here is the trick that even if he has to reject, his rejection cannot be arbitrary. is the power that has been given under the statute. It's not an arbitrary power that you can just reject. There has to be one of these four reasons that he has to document. And more importantly, once he documents that this is, let's say he feels that the price has not been determined in accordance with section 92C, he has to write it down that why the 92C is not being followed. After that, he himself has to follow the provisions of 92C. So even if he has to do a TP study, he cannot put a comparison from there and say that this is the comparison that I have. He himself has to follow the process which is described in the Act under section 92C. This is the relevance. So whenever you guys are getting notices from assessing officer, not TPO, will come to TPO, which is 92CA. When you are getting notices, don't take them on the face value, because it's not that he can just arbitrarily reject, because AOs, they don't have that specialization in TP. Many times they just say that I don't like your TP document, I have seen these 7 notices. But I don't like is not an answer, he has to not like because of one of the causes. And then when he does not like it, the owner shifts on him. The owner shifts on him from the taxpayer to do this compliance. So just bear that in mind. That's the relevance of this. Yeah.
Excuse me. What happens to the pending litigations prior to 2009, whether the SSC can take benefit of subsection 2B?
5%?
Yeah, section 2B, because it says nothing contained in subsection 2A shall empower the assessing officer to either assess or reassess under section 147 or 154 and all this.
If you see the circular on this, the circular which was issued, it said, we talked about the applicability of this 5%, the revised 5%. It said all cases pending before 1st of October 2009. Now, if that is the case, what is pending before 2009? Is it pending before the transferring officer, or is it before the
CIT appeal?
That is what the dispute was. But now there have been rulings on this matter which have clarified that if your case was not pending before a TPO, so 1st October 2009, if your case is not pending before the TPO, you will not get that 5% benefit. The earlier benefit. You will have to look at the new laws. That's the verdict.
It's against SSC.
Not against.
He has to recalculate. Even in the appellate proceedings, they have to recalculate according to the new laws.
Correct.
Yeah, Jigar, you wanted to. Jigar, there is a seat next to me.
So basically, one thing Arun pointed out very rightly, so that he has to reject basis one of these reasons. Importantly, if you read it below, and what you mentioned is that the assessing officer may proceed to determine arm's length price in relation to a said international transaction or specified domestic transaction in accordance with subsection 1 and 2. Importantly, note that arm's length price, it cannot just disallow. Let's say, for example, the transaction is that of an expenditure. He cannot disallow an expenditure. He has to actually compute the arm's length price and then only make addition or adjustment to the extent of the difference. So if he has not challenged your transaction, that the existence of the transaction, then he cannot disallow or add the entire amount. He has to compute arm's length price and then only he can proceed to make an adjustment. So the arm's length price can never be zero if the question is that whether the services were actually rendered. So then that's a different question. But if he has not challenged rendering of your service, arm's length price for rendering of service can never be zero. So that says that he has to actually go ahead and compute it, and only then he can propose an adjustment.
Jigar, may I request you to come and no, it's not like, see, it's a study circle meeting. Now this format is like, generally we sit in a round table. Only for here, it's very difficult to have this round table. That is why we are calling it, not otherwise. So come here and let us share, na?
Jigar, it will be easy to communicate.
It will be easy to communicate.
I'll finish the last time.
No, you can come, you can have over here.
We will not see you.
We won't look at it.
Okay. So alright, so now let us read further. There is a proviso, provided that an opportunity shall be given by the assessing officer by serving a notice calling upon the assessee to show cause on a date and time to be specified in the notice why the arm's length price should not be so determined on the basis of material or information or document in possession of the assessing officer. So this is just a show cause notice to be given. Right, subsection 4, where an arm's length price is determined by the assessing officer under subsection 3, the assessing officer may compute the total income of the assessee having regard to the arm's length price so determined. So that is only consequence here. Provided that no deduction under section 10A or 10AA or 10B or under chapter 6A shall be allowed in respect of the amount of income by which the total income of the assessee is enhanced after computation of income under this subsection. Further provided further that where the total income of an associate enterprise is computed under this subsection on determination of the arm's length price paid to another associate enterprise from which tax has been deducted or was deductible under the provisions of chapter, the income of the other associate enterprise shall not be recomputed by reason of such determination of arm's length price in case of first mentioned enterprise. So these both provisos are very clear. Right, friends? Now, friends, let us go through section rule 10C. Rule 10C.
Subsection 4 doesn't now say that it will be passed in conformity with, as in you say the computer total income of the system is that.
Subsection 4, shall I read?
So let's say that an arm's length price is determined with the A order three, the existing officer may compute total income of the assessee in conformity with the arm's length price. Is that amended or does it the line is still having regard? Because earlier there was a controversy when says having regard to.
The amended one, I think this is the old one.
Is that?
Amended one says the assessing officer has to pass an order in conformity with the order passed by the TPO. So that discretion which was available with the AO has been taken away. So whatever order is passed by the TPO, he has to incorporate that order as it is. So you are right.
Okay, so now it is mandatory on the part of the assessing officer to accept the direction of the TPO and not to apply his own mind.
He does not have a power.
Oh, that's really good. Thank you very much.
Also, is everyone clear on this proviso which talks about not getting a deduction under 10AA, 10A, 10B in case a TP adjustment is made? Because this will be relevant when you are doing your domestic TP analysis. So it could be different. And I'll give you an example. So let's say you have a transaction where you are let's say you are exporting goods to your parent company. It's a tele unit. And you are claiming a tele benefit. 100% exports you are getting a tele benefit. But TPO disallows, TPO says the value of export should have been 80 rupees. So whatever is. What will be the deduction that you will get? Will you get a deduction of, or rather let's say he enhances, if he enhances the number from 100 to 120, will you get a deduction on that 120? Will the income be considered as 120 or 100? So the answer to my mind is only 100, not 20. That is what this proviso is saying. You will have your cases of penny delivery, that's why this section is about.
So 10A, 10B, we will not get the enhanced deduction for 10A, 10B, right? That is the implication.
Correct.
But how it is going to affect our domestic something?
You will come.
Okay, alright. Let's now discuss Rule 10C. For the purpose of subsection 1 of section 92C, the most appropriate method shall be the method which is best suited to the facts and circumstances of each particular international transactions and which provides the most reliable measure of an arm's length price in relation to international transactions. In selecting the most appropriate method as specified in sub-rule 1, the following factors shall be taken into account, namely the nature and class of international transactions, the class or classes of associated enterprises entering into the transaction, and the functions performed by them, taking into account assets employed or to be employed and risk assumed by such enterprise, the availability, coverage and reliability of the data necessary for application of method, the degree of comparability existing between the international transaction and the uncontrolled transactions, and between the enterprise entering into such transactions. The extent to which reliable and accurate adjustment can be made to account for differences, if any, between the international transactions and comparable uncontrolled transactions, or between the enterprise entering into such transactions. The nature and extent and reliability of assumptions required to be made in application of method. So basically this rule 10C says how to select most appropriate method. And while selecting the most appropriate method out of these 6 methods, what are the factors one need to keep in mind? So these are all factors one need to keep in mind. I'll request Arun to throw some more light on these provisions.
See, I think this is, to my mind, the backbone of the TP analysis. Because how do you do a benchmarking? You have to first determine that which entity that you will select as a tested party. What is the characterization that you will give to the tested party? And based on that, because did we have a discussion on the methods so far?
No.
So you go into the methods. There are 6 methods, and each of them have a peculiarity. So some of the methods like RPM or CPM can be applied only to test only one side of the transaction, not both sides. So between a seller and a buyer, this method can be applied only to one side. Now which side to be applied? So unless I have the correct knowledge of the entity, what is this entity actually doing, and what are the terms of this entity, what is the characterization of this entity going to be, I will not be able to apply the right method. So for fundamental application of the method, all these considerations have been taken into account. I will give you a simple example. Let's say there is an Indian distributor of goods who is importing goods from his parent company and selling in India. Which method will be applied? I know we did not have a discussion on methods, but prima facie, which entity will be selected as a tested party? This entity in this case will be the distributor in India, because he is the simpler entity, he is doing least complex functions, and the other side is the manufacturer. So in this case, which method you will apply? Is the resale price method. Because when you are doing this, you are having regard to all these factors. You are looking at all these factors qualitatively and then selecting the right tested party and then applying the right method. This is the significance of this.
Right. So friends, as Arun said that selecting most appropriate method is very important. Like we will cover a couple of decisions after this. We read the sections and we will realize how important it is to select most appropriate method. Because
I'll just give you an example. See what happens is, next, in my example, you are not testing the Indian side, you are not testing the Indian distributor's margin, you are selecting the other side of the tested party. Your analysis itself is wrong, because you are trying to benchmark an entrepreneur's returns. That's never possible, because the other side will be an IP owner, he will be doing much more functions. Let's say he is a manufacturer of shoes, let's say a Nike. So a Nike cannot be compared with the Reebok, because both have different intangible values. So if you start doing that level of comparison, you will never get a right result. Rather than that, the easier and the technically correct way is to look at the Indian side. When you are looking at the Indian side, so when maybe you can use a TNM, transaction net margin method, to benchmark the other side. And when you are looking at the Indian side, the correct method is RPM. So both of them go hand in hand. Selection of the right tested party and then selection of the right method. That is where the relevance of this method is. If your method itself is wrong, your results are going to be wrong.
Correct. Very well said, Arun. So this was about, then this OECD guidelines also, chapter 2 part 1a says something about selection process should take into account strength and weakness of each method, appropriateness of the method considered, that is PAR plays a vital role, availability of reliable information, degree of comparability, reliability of comparability adjustment. Therefore, no one method is suitable in every possible situation, nor is it necessary to prove that a particular method is not suitable under the circumstances. Now, is 10B, I am not going to discuss 10B now.
Sorry, just one minute. Let's come back.
Yeah.
On the last two bullets, on the accurate adjustments and the reliability of data, these are again very, very critical factors. Let's say, and this is my favorite example, you cannot make an unreliable data. Let's say you are benchmarking the distributor. Now that distributor is of shoes in our example. You cannot take distributors of, let's say, cars and start benchmarking. The closest, like, generally even under a minimum analysis, you will not be, or a RPM or a CPM will not be able to get exact product comparability.
Correct.
So maybe you will digress it a bit. To what level the digression can be? You cannot start with a car and make economic adjustments and come down to this level. The economic adjustments, the second point is about the economic adjustments. Let's say you found comparables, but what about the working capital cycle? They might be having a working capital cycle of 90 days. I might be having a working capital of 30 days.
Correct.
I need to make an adjustment because otherwise the comparison is here. The comparables might be here, I might be here. I need to make a reliable adjustment. So you need to also evaluate whether those reliable adjustments are possible. Do you have the data for making that reliable adjustment? And also remember, friends, I always suggest, don't try to make too many adjustments. You might have read several case laws. People try to make some fancy adjustments. Customs, underutilization, forex, indigitization of products. So types and types of adjustments which people do. A bad comparable cannot become a good comparable and make too many adjustments. So if you have to make too many adjustments to the data to make it comparable, your comparability is wrong. Your comparability is somewhere inherently wrong. Don't make 10 adjustments to try to come to a right answer. Maybe change your search process. That will be my recommendation.
Just this working capital adjustment. We need to do it every time, or there's an option not to do it also.
There is nothing prescribed under the law. There is a section on receivables and payables. I'll talk about it in a minute because of which a working capital adjustment is warranted. But prior to this amendment where receivables and payables were considered as an international transaction, there was nothing mandatory. Even today there is no. Can I just hand it?
Yes.
I'm more comfortable like this.
Okay.
See what happens is, there is nothing written in the law that what type of adjustments are to be made. Read the law, there is nothing. We have been good enough to say that adjustment should be made. What adjustments? Removal is prescribed. So to answer your point, working capital is not mandated, but you should make it, because what is happening is, by not making an adjustment, you are looking at two set of data which are inherently not comparable. Working capital inherently plays a role in the margin that you are earning. So you need to bring it down or up, make an appropriate adjustment so that comparables in your company is at the same level. The margin analysis is accurate. That's one. Now if you look at the amendment which has been made under section 92B, which is talking about the definition of international transaction, it says that even receivables and payables are international transactions and you need to benchmark. You people are aware of it,
Yes.
right? How do you have to justify that receivables and payables are at arm's length? How do you do that? How do you do that? You do it by making a working capital adjustment overall and saying that even a working capital adjustment will automatically take into account the impact of outstanding receivables and payables. Automatically it will take care of. Once that is done, and after your working capital, if your results are at arm's length, you can say that even the payables and receivables are at arm's length. This is one way to do it. So while to conclude on your answer, there is nothing, no mandatory limit.
But it's better to make the adjustment than not make it.
Yes.
This second point which you make now, basically when
Residual payable.
when I do a working capital adjustment, does that imply that my receivables and payables now after adjustment are at arm's length, or the impact has been taken into
That
account?
impact has been taken into account. What is, if a receivable payable is outstanding, what happens? You are either clocking more inventory, more interest, or you are earning interest. One of the two vis-a-vis comparables. If you are making a working capital adjustment, you are already factoring that excess or lower in your in your operating results, if it is already factored into, there is no need to make an adjustment. And that factored in results, if those factored in results is higher than your comparables, then that means your transaction is a transaction. Clear? Everyone is clear on this?
He has a question.
Yeah. I thought it was for you.
With
Mine is that.
SDD coming in, more and more private limited companies coming in, more and more businesses coming under transfer limited. I always find, as I read this OECD guide, is availability of comparables, right, plays a major role over the transactions identifiable method. In sense, suppose the method is very much apt to be applied to a transaction, but there are lack of comparables, right? EPO will or the AO would go to a method where there is comparables, but identically that method is never to be applied to this kind of method. So while choosing, is it best of the worst case scenario we have to see?
See, because it's a very good point you have raised. Everyone got this point, right? The point we are trying is, though the method that you have selected is good, but to support that method, you don't have comparables. What do we do? Answer is, then in that case, go to the next alternative test method. So in my example, let's say you don't get distributors, and you are not left with an option but to select the other side and apply an overall table. Because that is a handicap on the data that you have.
Actually, the example would be basically resale price. I got distributor, I should use resale price, but I don't get gross margins in comparable data. So basically, that itself is the reason why we go to TNM.
Correct.
That exactly is reliability and availability.
So that is where that point of reliability and availability of data is there. Then there is a point of reliable adjustments. Let's say I'll give you another example. Let's say the geographic market in which your comparables and you are operating is different. How can you adjust for that difference? Your comparables are predominantly export oriented and you are selling locally, or vice versa. So geographic markets in which both of you are trading are different. How will you make an adjustment? Probably not. Then it's a case for you to reject and move on to the next one. Or reject an alternative.
Okay, just to add one last thing,
Yeah, please.
which might be very in few cases. Many times the next method never comes thank you. See, if I go to TNM, right, I don't really get even I go with huge universe. Okay, I can take this company, right? They actually does not become comparable, right? In that case, can my FAR analysis work, right? This is the FAR analysis. You benchmark towards my functions, assets and risk, right? I know there might not be a comparable, right? But there might be historical data. There might be some other businesses using same kind of activity. As cars and this cannot be compared, but activities is there. So this is there in few cases. I might not say this
It is there in many cases.
So that's what I'm saying.
Let me articulate and give you that point. See what happens is, when we are doing, let's say, TNM or RPM analysis in my example, shoes. So you start with distributors of shoes. You are not getting distributor of shoes. You expand. Then you go into distributor of maybe clothes. I'm just thinking of apparels. You will start looking at keywords and you will try to broad base the search. So practically, it will very seldom happen that you will reject RPM and go to TNM. Practically, we will broad base the set and we will say that look, distributors of apparels or distributors of a particular similar items, same industry or similar industry are the closest comparable that I can have, because it's always the horse before the cart, not the cart before the horse. The functional characterization says you are a distributor. For a distributor, the right method is RPM. RPM, the perfect comparable should have been shoes. If I'm not getting shoes, let's move ahead and look at apparels, or you try to expand your search. But if after all expanding, if your expansion is going way beyond, in my example, it was an extreme like cars. But if you're even your normal thing is you are not going to up to level of cars, but your results are showing that those are drastically different, then it's better to reject that method and move to the next one. That is what the point is.
That's why, except the cup. The cup is the most stringent method where
Right.
there is a product comparativity. So except that all the other four methods give you that little leeway just to focus more on the function rather than the product.
It is also accepted by the department.
Yes.
You have any
Yes. And see what happens is when you are talking about margins,
right?
in the three methods that we have, PSN is an animal in itself, but if you look at other methods, we are talking about margins. Margins are more affected by your functionality than product. As a distributor, if I tell you the distributor of an apparel, he will more or less earn margin the same line.
Yes.
More or less, unless he is dealing with some exotic material. Then he is an outlier. But generally the industry margins are in the same way. Unlike that, a product, a cup, that is directly affected by the product you are selling, because this phone of Samsung and this is a Note 2, a Note 1. A Note 1 and Note 2 can never be compared. Because the price changes, the moment they add another one, the price changes. So Note 1 and Note 2 cannot be compared. If I have to compare, I have to compare Note 1 with a Note 1, or Note 2 with a Note 1.
This comparability of functions, what you are mentioning for RPM, would it change vis-a-vis the comparison for DNM?
Sorry?
This comparability of functions is basically saying similar functions of distributor.
Yeah.
Now for RPM, I will get a certain degree of comparability. For TNM, would it be a different degree? Would it be a more easier norm than rather than stringent?
It's further broad basis,
Yeah.
because under RPM and a CPM, what you are looking at is the gross margin.
Yes.
Now, gross margin is more affected by product and functional comparability vis-a-vis a net margin, which is more affected by your functional comparability. So when I look at the net margin which is made by a distributor, generally the distributor in a particular industry, which is FMCG, FMCG is an industry in itself, will be widely different. However, the gross margin which various people in that FMCG are making, the distributors, will vary because of the product that they are dealing with. Like it's like the example, if you take a distributor of a Skoda, these are a distributor of Maruti, the gross margin that he will be earning will be different. But at the net level, more or less the margins will be in the similar range, because they are more dealing in cars, a similar range of cars.
I am not able to follow this. Basically, arithmetically, if I look at the profit and loss,
Yeah.
gross margin would be containing the material cost, the sales, the purchase, and the adjustment for stocks,
Correct.
maybe some direct expenses. Then net margin would be basically, the net margin would be after the admin establishment expenses.
Correct.
Now, in case of a distributor or a dealer of Skoda and Maruti, which you are comparing, gross margin would be different because the margins would be different, the volumes would be totally different. Agreed. But in case of net, when I come to net, the overheads, the establishment overheads, admin overheads, selling expenses, are they going to be so different that it will compensate for the difference in gross margin?
See, the fundamental is that what is happening is, how much do you need to promote a brand of Skoda vis-a-vis a brand of Maruti?
So selling expenses could be higher,
That could be higher.
which will compensate for the higher gross margin.
Correct.
Which will compensate the higher gross margin.
Correct. So you know what happens is, Skoda might be having 2 showrooms in Mumbai. Maruti might be having 4 showrooms in Mumbai. So all those established expenses might be different. So what is the hypothesis? And you see,
Yeah, what is the hypothesis? That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, so I am trying to give you some practical examples also. What happens is, at a net level, if you see overall, at a net margin level, this function, this differences gets evened out, and the margin which both of the distributors will be earning will be broadly in the same range. Skoda guy might be earning 3.5, and this guy might be earning 2.9. But broadly, they will be in the same range. Gross margins will be different because the product pricing itself is different, and the product costing itself is different. So the gross margins will be significantly different because they are affected by 2 things: price and the function. Right.
Friends, now this rule 10B, Kinjal will take up in her presentation. These are all only methods, how to apply methods, various methods, cup methods, all these methods, modalities of applications are given. Alright. Now let us concentrate on few of the judgments which I could gather first, I'm just reading it. Assessee cannot say that none of the methods can be applied and be absolved of the statutory duty of determining ALP. Now, sometimes it happens, Arun, that we can't make out which method to apply, because either this way or that way. But the statute says, see, anyhow you apply some method and activate ALP, right?
So I think I disagree. Lot of times when we say that none of the methods can be applied, primarily we are trying to say none of it fits my case. We try and say, okay, my margin under this method is lower compared to the aggregate margin. So that's not the best method. You need to actually look at the rules and determine which method in these circumstances applies best. And if you are saying that your transaction is maybe slightly different or your FAR is slightly different, then make adjustments to the comparables or to your margins to get it more comparable. But I think when we as assessees or taxpayers or advisors, when we start saying that none of method applies, probably what we test is none of them fits my margins. So that's not the correct way to start in the first place. So it is not that these 5 methods have come up in Indian tax law all of very sudden and there is no thought behind it or no research. Transfer pricing has been practiced internationally over 40 years almost now.
Right.
And there has been a lot of material, lot of study, lot of enhancements coming, and India has adopted its model based on OECD guidance, which has been done after consultation with a lot of countries, lot of taxpayers, tax administrators, advisors. So when these 5 methods, it is mostly 99.9% chance that one of the methods clearly applies. And where it does not apply, again the Indian tax law says that you have this other method which you could rely upon.
Right.
But that has very limited application. You should not directly jump on to other. First you should try and see which method clearly applies to me, and then look at comparables, and if you believe there is a difference, try and make adjustments. But it is mostly the case that we say this method is not applicable because margins are different. So that's not the correct approach.
See, as Hardik said that I know the cup is method is the best suited to this. Say I'm exporting something, the cup is the best, but I don't have comparables. So I am supposed to go to the next method. Is it like this is like if I just because I don't get comparable, shall I adopt any other method? No. So generally, yeah.
Sure.
So we like the practitioners, we face this problem that we know this is the best method, but we don't get comparables, direct comparables. So shall we go to the next method?
Just one point here. When we say we don't get comparables, have we exhausted all the source of getting the comparables? Did you ever examine that there is a whole lot of source of information beyond prowess or capital I? So think at it this way, that
Okay.
have we exhausted all the options or all the sources from which information was possible?
Okay.
So give an example other than the databases.
There are a lot of other examples, like for example for pricing of commodities. So
Okay.
commodity
Stock
exchange
exchange.
provides prices.
Commodities.
When you go to industry reports, for example, sometimes back, software industry report was published by NASSCOM, which gave hourly rates for certain things. So those could also be. I'm not saying that those are the best options, but have you exhausted all the sources? So look at these options. Industry forums are there. A lot of such things are there. So maybe what we try and do is look at a limited picture and try and see if it fits my condition. You to take a little more efforts, think beyond what is normally being done, and try and see if you can find a solution to your situation.
So it's a very good point which Peter has made. Two things. Please don't start with the results. So normally, I've seen many people. What they try to do is, I'm earning 5%. I have to justify 5%. Now let me find 5% is right or not. Please don't do that. That's the wrong way to do a TP analysis. And as you see what is happening is today almost 70% of the global trade is happening between related parties. So 70% of the transactions of the world are subject to transfer pricing somewhere or other in the world. And we are fortunate in India that we have a sixth method. In the world there are only 5 methods. Most of the countries, except Brazil and where there are peculiar methods, but otherwise there are only 5 methods broadly. So you cannot get a cup. Cup is generally difficult to get. But under other methods, finding comparables, I don't see a challenge. As I was saying, I was taking this example. If it is distributor of shoes, you will not get a distributor of shoes. And you move to a distributor of apparel. You will get unless you are in an industry which has a monopoly, which today's world it's not a practical reality. So think about broad basing yourself and then coming out with results and make adjustments to have a correct thing. But in today's time, my gut feeling and Jigar Marketing and all of you will agree, if you go to a transfer officer and say that none of the methods will apply, it's a disaster. You are then giving all the ammunition to the transferring officer to make the applicability of the method, come out with the comparables and determine the right margin. In my mind, if I have to give a practical example, it's like giving AK-47 in the hands of a Duncan monkey and then you will face the music. So be sensitive to that.
Yeah, Arun, once again to the same issue. Say I am selling some product to my associate enterprise. So ideally, cup is the most appropriate method. Looking at the things, right? Generally, or
so cup.
Can we say when in case of sell transaction, cup is the most appropriate method? We can make a standard statement.
No, yeah, I will be just taking that up, and I'll just before he ends, I completely agree with them that the other method is I think a boon for us, because say in the case of the classic example I can give of is the director's remuneration under STT, which comes under the purview of TP now. It's usually a very confidential data for the director's remuneration to benchmark that. It's not very easily available. What in one of the cases we did was we actually got the director's CV circulated to all the HR consultants across, which we have a lot of recruitment firms now, and we got their best offers from them, and which we used as a comparable, because we eventually got at least 3 other offers from 3 companies offering a certain remuneration to the same director. So that again was under the other method and not any of the 5 methods. So even I agree completely that the other method is, pardon?
Can custom valuation can be used if it is like say purchase of second-hand machinery from an associate enterprise? Can I take a base that customs have approved the valuation, because I cannot get an exact comparable being a customized machinery which has been sent to an associate concerned to me. So can I take a custom valuation, it has been approved, and fit it into other method?
You can. Because if
Arun, I think I disagree.
I was completely good. No, good, and add a point. See, 2 things. Just don't go on the basis that customs has agreed. That's why it's a council.
No, just a supporting.
What you have to do is the basis on which the customs guy has agreed, which is generally a third-party valuation report, that has to be taken and say that this thing has been accepted by customs. This is the basis on which a valuation has been done, and this is my basis. So you don't take customs report as the basis, but you take the third-party values report as the basis.
But that's assuming you've exhausted all the 5 methods. Yeah.
Just to add what he said, the customs and transfer price totally work in different directions. So, custom officer may have accepted your price because your price is higher than the market price. He would be glad to collect more duty. So that is approved. Yes, transfer price, it says that you have to purchase it at arm's length price, which could be lower than market price but not higher.
Yeah, but it can be one.
But Jigar, sorry, if I understand. That's why I say, you are doing that, like in this example, the second-hand machinery. You are using that to determine the basis, you are using a third-party valuation report. So the third-party independent valuation report is something which you can take.
Exactly.
I don't think that you should not take it. You can take it and you fit it under the other method. Rather, if you look at any valuation report for any transaction, that does not fit under any of the methods technically. It's not a CUP, it's not RPM, CPM, PSM or TNM. So earlier, people used to write CUP, or they used to say no, refer note below for valuation reports. So let's say you are doing a transfer of IP So you used to write, refer note below it, they used to write a note. But with this other method, that's the flexibility which has been given. So you can, to my mind, Jigar, unless you disagree, you can use a valuation report to defend your second-hand purchase.
Just one minute of discussion. There's one point which I noticed. As you said, 70% of the transactions happen with related parties, right? Now, optimist view, yes, you should try all the 5 methods, right? Any one would be okay. I think in the case of India, just being in India, there are 2 things. First of all, earlier there were no many businesses which were coming under the ambit of transfer pricing, where there was a presence of unorganized sector. Now with SDT, there might be domestic transfer, there might be many businesses, right, which might be having the presence of unorganized sector, right, for which the data would not be available. Can you speak?
No, sorry, I get to this. Because you look at any industry today, be it clinical trials industry or a logistics industry, I'm talking about unorganized one. Logistics in India is one of the most unorganized sectors. You still have data. You still have data in the public domain. So you take up any or courier industry, you will not get 10 comparables, but you will get 3 or 4 or 5.
Yes, I'm just coming. So if you get a couple of comparables, right, there was a point. Suppose you come across that there are high amount of related party transactions in that comparables, right? So in a just word, even they are hinted, if possible, right? So if there is something adjustment on their part, because see, when TPO is saying however efficient, however integrated he has, he would be having some data which would be not be available with us, right?
Which is 136 data.
Right?
Which is the 136 data that you are talking.
Right. So if suppose it goes against that comparable parties, it might also affect your data.
So can I just articulate?
Yes.
You have 2 points.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
Point 1 is you have a related party in the comparables.
Right.
Point 2 is that what happens, some public data which is not used in the public domain is used by the people, right?
Right.
Those are the
Right.
two.
Right.
Can I, if you finish and I'll answer.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a few things. There are some industries, and I'll talk about logistics. In logistics industry, the dynamics of this industry is such that they can function without a related party. You need to have a related party. So anywhere, any company you put up, generally the RPT will be in the range of 50, 60, 70%. There, my practical experience has been the companies that we have been selecting include companies which are having RPTs. And the argument that we have been taking is that, look, the whole industry cannot work in a tilted manner. Whole industry cannot be shifting money one way, because there is a mix of Indian companies and overseas companies. So the overseas companies are sucking money out, the Indian companies are sucking money in. There is an average and it gets evened out. And since there is no data which is available other than this, you have to accept. And if you are in the tribunals are accepted. Now there are tribunal rulings in case of DHL and Agility which have accepted this. That is one. Coming to your point of 133.6, if you read these rules very carefully, this section of the rules very carefully, data which is they are talking about is the data which is generally available in the public domain. Okay. So the power of 133.6 which is being used by the TPOs, that has been challenged many a times. And this is a data which is not in our position. This is a cherry picking approach, because what is happening also, please understand. If TPO, let's say he knows that this Farana company is a comparable, but how has he selected that comparable? Has he selected through the application of 92C1XC2? You cannot just cherry pick, it's like I will call for a report of an Infosys, but where did I get that Infosys is a comparable? Which search did I adopt? So that is one part, that without having a search, you have picked up cherry pick the comparable. Second is that you have tried to use a company whose data is not available in the public domain, which is ultra vires the provisions of the Act itself. Now, there have been many instances where these arguments have been taken. To the best of my recollection at this point of time, and Jigar, you can add, I don't think any tribunal has adjudicated on this matter for use of secret comparison. There have been some stray verdicts here and there, but not a straight point that whether strictly secret comparables can be used or not. The 133.6 does give them the power to use, but ideally under this law you should use only data which is available in the public through us, selected through a search process.
But if I remember the
I would beg to disagree because I believe there are rulings which say that you can use data of 136 if you share all the details with the SSC. So there have been many tribunal rulings on that, and although maybe not specifically just on that 133.6, it is a part and parcel of other issues also along with it. But they have been very categorical stating that 133.6 data can be used. Indian regulations don't bar from the usage of that data.
But I'll tell you another ruling which is still in the tribunal, and I'm representing one of the cases. This is the point that exactly we are debating. That though 136 allows, and that data if you which is shared with the taxpayer, is it something which should be considered within the provisions of Act? Within the provisions of Act. So let me make this straight. So within the provisions of the Act, is it permitted? Now this specific question has not been answered in as many words. But that's why I say that there are stray findings and stray rulings which I have just said this word. So 133.6 power, though it has been endorsed, they have not really endorsed the view that in all cases you can go and cherry pick a secret comparator whose data is not available in the public domain. And the case that I am I'm associated with, this is one of the questions that we are harping upon. And if the verdict comes out in the, I cannot disclose it now, but the verdict is going to be on this point that whether as per the TP provisions is it permitted or not permitted. That fundamental question was never articulated in as many words.
But if I remember the OECD TP guidelines, they actually allow the use of OECD TP, that is allow use of secret comparables. It has to be placed before the taxpayer for him to rebut. That is first thing. Second point, which is that basically cherry picking we are talking about, there also OECD TPG guidelines allow you to add to the comparable companies of competitors or people whom you know who are directly doing the work which you are doing, which would boost the comparability process.
See, perfect. I agree. Now let me just step back. Why are we following this search process? Now I know of my 5 competitors, top 5. But there may be 50 others I don't know. The scale, is this analysis robust then? When I am following a process of 92 C1 and C2 and I am undertaking a structured search, what I am doing is I am trying to get as much data as possible. And I am not saying, okay, he is one of my competitors or I will pick up only 5 of my competitors. There is that exhaustiveness coming.
I can add to the list.
So let me just, you are adding to the list. But where is that addition coming from? Where is that addition coming from? Through your own knowledge that this guy is my comparable, that guy is my comparable. But is it coming through a structured search? Because what will happen is, if your addition is permitted, let me give you a hypothetical example. I do a search and I say I am getting only one comparable. I just add another 2 because of the sources that I know. Because those are favorable results to me. Will the TP accept it? No. Because he will say, please finish your search process thoroughly. Because I don't know whether only 3 comparables are the ones which will come out of the structured search, or there can be 20 others which can come out.
But again, TP guidelines say, if OECD TP guidelines is of any relevance in this discussion, that again TP guidelines say that your comparability search need not be exhaustive. Yeah, basically you want to see the cost and the benefits which are deriving from the search process, and for that matter, even your domestic law doesn't talk about a search from a database. So basically, at the end of the day, I give a list of companies, and as I am giving an argument to the TPO that these are all comparable, the officer can come out with 5 of his own companies, and it's a matter of debating the comparability.
Exactly. And then what we are doing is, we are doing 2 things. And your point of robustness and cost benefit, let's park that, let's come to it later. But let's answer the first point. What we are trying to say essentially is, you can go with your 5 comparables, TPO will come up with his 5 comparables, then you fight and you mutually negotiate. That's not how a TP law works. If that was the case, there was no requirement of we listing down all these conditions, all these criteria. The very reason of listing down these criteria is to put a framework which is to be applied equally by the taxpayer and the tax authority. So that is where if you go to next section 92C3, which says that if he has to reject, then he has to follow 92C1 and C2. So the onus is cast equally on the taxpayer and the tax authority to follow a structure to remove the arbitrariness from both sides. Just go back to even your provisions of SDT. What was the rationale of introducing an SDT? The rationale of introducing an SDT was to say that today it's 48B said that in the opinion of the assessing officer, if the assessing officer is of the opinion of he believes, he can believe anything. But to put a cap on his beliefs, they said that look, there is a structure. How do you determine your comparable, which is in the 92 and 92F? Use that structure to come out with an answer which is rational and which is structured and methodical. That is where this comes into picture, because otherwise there will be no end to it. There will be never to an end to it, and there will be no structure. It will be a complete chaos. You are negotiating, he is negotiating, you are sitting and you are doing a barter. What suits? You will say 10%, you will say 5%, let's say 7%.
But tell me,
sorry. Coming to your point of that cost, the OECD, when they have said that robustness of the search and the cost involved, they have said it in the context of small taxpayers. They have never said that large taxpayers or all taxpayers should not do a robust search. They have never said that. They have rather said that search should be done as robust as possible. Only thing is, if there is a very small taxpayer or a very small transaction, and if it is administratively more cumbersome to do a search and it is much more costly to do a search, then limit your search. That's the onus we will given to the tax authorities, that limit your request on the data that you will ask from a small taxpayer. That is not barring either the tax authority or the taxpayer from doing a robust search. Otherwise, what is the meaning? I'll say that okay, I found 5 comparables based on my general knowledge. I'll not apply anything else. These are 5 comparables that I have. Is that such robust? Because we are looking at the industry margins here. That is where the question, I think you are saying that is 3 a representative set or 2 a representative set? How do I determine?
Here, I don't know.
Time.
No, time is not a problem here. We can pull out the information from ROC website like search and all this. And also public domain, or only through the structured search you do search. That is only the.
See what happens is there is no estoppel, and I think you said that there is nothing written under the TP law that says you should use a province, you should use a capital line. There is nothing. And to what level you can go, probably sky's the limit. As I think Jigar was saying, you can go to M6 website, industry forums, etc. And sky's the limit. But what happens is, from ROC, this progress and data, capital database, what they have tried to do is, they have tried to get all the data from these websites. They have tried to, classify them under separate headings. Services, manufacturing, within services, they have tried to subsect it. So when you look at these type of searches, you can say that I have done the best possible job. Because what is the best, there is no answer. After Progress Capital, there will be another MCX and royalty stat and an Amadeus and ICRS. It will go on and on and on. But I have to stop somewhere. But if I just go into the website of this company law board and just ROC and just get some annual reports, is it exhaustive? I have asked for 3 annual reports. They gave me 3 annual reports. But are these the 3 which are the comparable? I don't know. There can be a 4th and a 5th and a 6th. ROC, which is available in the public domain. That is where this relevance of database comes in. And it is not only in India. If you go to any of the globe, go to any part of the globe, all of them have a similar process. We have databases from where data is pulled out and which is like a best evidence, even the TPOs and the tax authorities globally respect these type of searches because it is reducing the arbitrage and showing the best trend.
Right. Well, friends, now let us proceed. Thanks, Arun, for very good interactive.
What is the this thing of the relevance of the OECD guidelines in the context of Indian DP regulations? Are they followed generally?
So, if you look at many of the tribunal rulings, earlier one of the rulings said that tribunal rulings should be used to the extent they are not contradictory to Indian regulations. But if you more or less see today, see what is happening is two things. We have written law, but there is no explanation under the law. So explanation which you will take and explanation which I will take, there will be variation, and there is no guidance how to apply in this place. Unlike a US regulations where you have enough examples, so you understand what it is. So where do we go? Where do we go and draw guidance from? That's why we have gone into OECDs. If you look at so many judgments, almost every alternate judgment of a tribunal, you will find difference of an OECD. And so, to my mind, OECD is one good place where you can look at, even if you want to understand TP law, my suggestion would be read OECD. Because the explanation and the practical examples which OECD has given will help you understand TP law better. Because TP law is 92 to 92F, it's nothing. It finishes before even you start. So, if you really want to understand, OECDs and the US regulations are the best way because they give you practical examples.
Next judgment, the statute, the second number, the statute that prescribes the method and it is to be followed. Even if there is difficulty, it is not for the ITAT to prescribe a new method. This was held. Another, Cherokee India Private Limited, it was a captive unit, followed cost plus method, added 6% margin on estimated standard cost, incurred losses in books. The assessor did not produce agreement to justify the method of charging the margin on standard cost. I am just reading the para 8 which I found relevant. In our considered opinion, the initial burden is upon the assessee to prove the correctness of the method followed. Though the assessee has to prove that the method followed by it is the most appropriate method, it is not an unfettered choice of the taxpayer. This is subject to following certain procedure. Apart from the reliability of the data of the uncontrolled transaction, it is mandatory to every person who has entered into international transaction to keep and maintain such information and document as may be prescribed, and the assessing officer may require such person to furnish any such information and documentation within a particular period of time. Rightly pointed out by the tax authority, in the case of contract manufacturer, it is unthinkable for a manufacturer to agree in writing to carry on the business so as to end up in losses. Assessee having not taken actual cost into consideration, TPO assessing officer as well as the learned CITA have correctly noticed that either under TNMM or under cost plus method, the cost of goods supplied should be taken into consideration. So in this case, this standard cost was considered by them, not estimated budgeted cost, and they incurred losses. So these are the just observation that it is not unfettered choice of the taxpayer that is subject to following certain procedures. So it is not unfettered that the way you want to apply the method. You have to be consider all the points, relevant factors, and then select the procedure, this method. Then friends, now, yeah.
This is the precise point that we were debating about a few minutes back, which even tribunals have endorsed. It is not an unfettered choice of the taxpayer, neither the tax authority, to apply the method or use the method as they want. They have to be bound by what is written in the law. Even tribunals have endorsed this. Apart from this, there are many judgments, where the same wordings have been used.
Yes.
And it is not an unfettered choice. Both have to follow taxpayer and tax authorities. Once the taxpayer has discharged his obligation, if the tax authority wants to dispute it, he has to follow the same process.
Right. Now this Sardia Pharmaceutical India Private Limited, I think I found this very interesting. Para 50, in terms of the provision of section 92C1, as evident from a plain reading of the said provision, the arm's length price in relation to an international transaction is to be determined by one of the prescribed method, which is most appropriate method, having regard to nature of transaction, class of associated person, function performed by such person, or such other relevant factors as the board may prescribe. Section 92C2 provides that it is only the most appropriate method as referred to in section 92C1 which can be applied for determination of arm's length price in the prescribed method. The choice of method on the basis of which arm's length price is determined is therefore not an unfettered choice on the part of taxpayer. And in our considered view, the choice has to be exercised on the touchstone of principles governing sections of most appropriate method set out in section 92C1. The first step in determination of arm's length price is the selection of the right method of computing the arm's length price. Once the right method is selected under section 92C1, the next step is the application of the method so selected in computation of arm's length price as is set out under section 92C2. On both of these aspects of exercise of determining the arm's length price, however, the assessing officer has the overriding powers for course correction. These powers are set out in section 92C3A, which provides that where during the course of any proceeding for the assessment of income, the assessing officer inter alia of the opinion that the price charged or paid in an international transaction has not been determined in accordance with section 92C1 and section 92C2, the assessing officer may proceed to determine the arm's length price in relation to said international transaction in accordance with section 92C1 and 92C2 on the basis of such material or information or documents available with him. The assessing officer has the power to determine arm's length price when the arm's length price computed by the taxpayer is not on the basis of correct applying the method of computing the arm's length in terms of provisions of section 92C2, as also when the method of selecting most appropriate method of computing arm's length price is not determined in accordance with the scheme of things envisaged under section 92C1. This provision is, however, subject to the condition that the assessing officer has to give an opportunity, right, by serving a so-called notice. The twin condition of compliance with the provisions under section 92C1 and 92C2 have to be fully complied with by the taxpayer, and it is only when this onus is properly discharged by the taxpayer that the assessing officer is restrained from resorting to determination of arm's length price by him in terms of section 92C3A. Yeah. So this judgment further says, in view of the above discussion, in our considered view, it is clear that the selection of method of determining the arm's length price is not the unfettered discretion of the taxpayer. It is not at all necessary, as has been contended by the assessee, that unless the assessing officer can demonstrate the arm's length price computed by the assessee is not computed in the manner as prescribed in the regulation, he cannot reject the method chosen by the taxpayer. The assessee cannot simply pick up any of the specified method without discharging the onus of demonstrating that the method so selected is indeed the most appropriate to the facts of the case. Once the assessee places on record reasons for selecting a particular method of determining the arm's length price, that reasoning can be declined, though for cogent reasons, by the transfer pricing officer, and that aspect of the matter can be challenged before the appellate authorities. It is therefore not really correct to claim that the assessee has an unfettered choice of choosing the method of determining arm's length price. So friends, in this judgment, what I can understand was that the taxpayer has chosen one method, ultimately TNMM, must have done the analysis, must have done the search process and everything, must have put on record. The assessing of, this was in case of this API, right?
Import of it.
Yeah, import of this pharmaceutical company. So they said that the cup method is most appropriate method, and they got the information from the competitor, and then the full analysis has been done. So ultimately, see, I'm just discussing with you, and I would like to have your view. the tribunal here says कि you have to select the most appropriate method. You know, earlier we were discussing that, you know, in this case, particular case, this cup was applied. In this particular case, the cup was applied by the tribunal, though they have followed the TNM method. Now, I also feel the cup is the most appropriate method. Only thing, for one or other reasons, by discriminating this or by this or that, ultimately I come to TNM. So, isn't it a very risky?
So I'll answer this point. It's a valid point to be understood. Go back to the thought that we were talking about. The cup is very sensitive to the pricing. In case of Sardia and many other pharmaceutical companies, this investment has happened. What they are doing is the TPO, he compares the price of the imported APIs. APIs is like the raw material for medicines. That import price is compared with the prices at which, you know, comparable APIs are imported by third parties. They go to their customs database, take the software, and they take their comparable prices and they try to compare it. Now it's an inherently wrong thing to be done because the API which is imported by Sardia, it's a branded API. The difference between a branded API and a generic API is branded API is a research API and generic API is API which is being manufactured through a reverse engineering process once the patent has expired. So, okay, for everybody's clarity, branded API and the generic API is like brand is the original, the generic is a copy. Simple. There is a vast difference between a branded API pricing and a generic API pricing. Vast difference. And there are differences in the qualities also. And what happens is, these companies like GSK or your Sardias of the world, they will not buy an API from a Chinese manufacturer or from any other manufacturer because they don't know whether their product will be suitable to their standards. Because it's like this, that if I am manufacturing a McDonald's burger, you know, globally in McDonald's, they import potatoes from Mexico, globally. They don't buy locally. So even in India, when the potatoes are used in the McDonald's outlet, it's a potato imported from Mexico. The reason is, as per the group policy, you can sell a burger as a McDonald's burger only if you use a Mexican potato which has been approved by the group. Because that's the quality that you need. Similar goes for API. I as Sardia, cannot use ABCD API. So there is a vast difference in the product, which is the generic API, which is the original, and a copy. Because copy, under the Indian law, there is something called bioequivalence. I'm not getting into the technicalities, but there is a standard which says if broadly this copy and original are comparable, you can use it. So go to, and I'll give you an example of branded and copy. Go to this medicine Crocin. The essential ingredient is paracetamol. You have many versions of paracetamol. If Crocin costs you 10 rupees, the normal paracetamol will cost you 1 rupee. Because Crocin is a branded product, these are generic products, or the copy and the original. You cannot compare the two products. And as we were saying, under CUP, the product comparability is of utmost importance. FIFO is of utmost importance. So unless I can prove that this product is comparable in all aspects, I cannot make that comparability analysis. That's a wrong analysis. And even in the TIPS software, what is happening is they just give you the quantitative details that these are the prices at which the product has been brought, these are the rates at which they have been brought. That's it. They don't talk about the terms of the contract, how many, what was it FOB or CIF, or what was the credit term, nothing. Forget about the product comparability. So on these accounts, CUP is not the right method to use. It's like this, if I can make a very simple example. If I import a Nike shoe, can I use a price of a Bata shoe to benchmark it? Both are shoes. No. No, a Nike shoe can never be compared to the Bata shoe. But for that matter, take any product. Even a mobile, a Samsung mobile cannot be compared with an Apple iPhone. Though the features might be exactly same. We know this. So, doing a price two different products is inherently wrong, and that's where this idea ruling is slightly has gone overboard. In when you're doing a cup analysis, it is a very, very stringent analysis which has to be done. Very, very stringent analysis which has to be done under cup, because you are comparing pricing. In my example, Bata and Nokia, Nike should cannot be compared. So that's the reason why they went to that.
Arun, my question again was little bit different. In this case, in case of Sadia, they could have taken up the cup as a method and they could have done the adjustment to the price considering all these other aspects.
No,
is it not possible?
Not possible.
I think
Quality itself is different. Quality of that product itself is different. It's like this. I'll give you an example. You go to a McDonald's, you buy a burger, and you have the local vendor who is selling a local burger. What adjustments can you make to make a McDonald's burger pricing comparable?
Brand valuation, some adjustment must be possible. No? We can't say it's impossible.
Not possible. What is that brand value adjustment that you do? And plus, the two products themselves are not comparable. The products themselves are not comparable. A McDonald's burger and a local, let's say a Vada Pav or a local burger, can never be compared. And if they are not comparable, under cup, because you are dealing with the pricing, you are comparing the pricing, this will be a fraud.
we will see cases of that when I do the cup method as
Right,
well.
right.
That when it comes to
That
everything.
adjustment can be made for the terms or other things. It cannot be done for the quality.
Yeah, but exactly. But
like you
inherently,
said, the terms are like whether it is on FOB or CIF or the credit period or the, for that one can do that,
so you can do that, but
but not for the quality.
but if you go back to some conversations which we were having earlier, I did mention that you cannot make a bad comparable or good comparable by making adjustment. That pricing itself is wrong. To compare the pricing itself is wrong. You cannot make it comparable by making these adjustments. These are secondary. That first itself is incorrect.
Yeah.
Sorry, but here, H2O, water is a water anywhere in the world.
Sorry?
It's a chemical composition.
Sorry?
H2O, which is a water chemical composition, is a chemical composition throughout the world. It will be the same. Here, what we are talking about is products which are off patent. So I think leave aside the branding bit of it. Okay? We leave aside the branding, the Nike and the Bata. We leave aside the branding and the value which is coming from the branding. But otherwise, the products are comparable, especially in this case.
No, they are not
I'll
comparable.
tell you why. Okay, because one is API is a chemical composition. First of all, now Sardia may be an innovator for that, or the I would say the company who has done the patent for it. Now the product is already off patent. Okay, so anybody can manufacture, and this is a generic that we are comparing. It's not even a patent that we are comparing. It's two generics that we are comparing. Sardia vis-a-vis any other, say Cipla. Okay, now Cipla is also a company which is equally renowned in India. Let's take an example which will be more easy for people to grasp. So, if it is importing from China, let us understand an example that Cipla has imported something from China and Sardia has imported from wherever in Europe. You may say that, okay, that I would want to account or I would want to have adjustments, etc., for impurities, etc., which are there in the API, okay? Or have some mechanism, but outrightly rejecting a cup, according to me, is that we are actually going overboard, because first of all, the product is not patented. Okay? It is off patent.
Okay.
So just by saying that, okay, it is just not comparable. Because see there will be standards as per the, say, because when you look at US, there is the FDA. Okay? Similarly, there is the Indian authority or the Indian Drug Administrator. So everywhere there are basic standards. I am not saying that, say, the European standard may be a little more stringent as compared to Indian standard. But at the same time, just ruling it out outright, how will I price? How will I get a comparison elsewhere? So just some thoughts on that.
No, fair enough. If you permit me to talk for 2 minutes, I'll exactly take 2 minutes to answer.
Yeah, sure.
See, I'll tell you, there is a global debate on this, and there is a global, GSK ruling in case of Canada, all of that, which has been trying to deal with this issue of branded versus generic comparison. Now, what has been happening is, if I have to prove, so when you look at a branded and a generic, what is the basic difference is, the branded product has to go through clinical trials, and clinical trials take 12 years. They have to go through four phases of clinical trials.
I
Let
think
me just.
it is a difference between a patented
No, it is not.
a non-patented.
I'm talking about branded and generic, so let me just complete it.
Okay.
So a branded product is manufactured after 12 years of extensive research and clinical trials. Unlike that, a generic product can be manufactured through a reverse engineering process. Even in India, the two products are not comparable. There is a bioequivalence concept. It says if the generic drug is bioequivalence is between 80 to 100 or 80 to 120, I think, then you can use this and sell this product in India. That is how it is. So the two products are not comparable in the first place. If let's say if I am a manufacturer of Sardia medicine, I will not use a generic unless I have done all the tests to satisfy myself. That this medicine will give the same effect to the patient which my branded medicine is giving. That's point number one. Second, if I have to sell product as a Sardia pharmaceutical medicine, I have to use the API which has been approved by the group. Unless that product is approved by my group, I will not use it. It is like a Ferrari. If I have to use a Ferrari, I have to use the piston of Ferrari. I cannot use a piston of Maruti and say this is a Ferrari. It will not be a Ferrari product. Ferrari will not allow me. So this is the second thing. The third thing is, unless that test is being done to prove that these are exactly identical, I will not be able to. And the bioequivalence tests say these are similar, not exactly identical. So my rebuttal in this case is these are not similar. That's why cup is not being taken. If you as tax authority want to prove it, go ahead, do the clinical trials, do the testing, prove it to me that these are comparable. Because I, in my wisdom, am saying these are not comparable. These are in fact not comparable. And this is a practical example that I had in one of the cases where we actually got a lab test done, and we found that the impurities which are coming in the generic product was much higher than what it was here. And there are many tests that I have to do, because it's ultimately at the end of the day I am dealing with a human life. One medicine which goes wrong can get the entire company closed. Who will take that risk? This is a product which has been approved. Unless you say it is exactly similar, exactly identical, I will not approve it. So that is the argument. There are other arguments on the other side as well, lots of it, that these generics and branded are comparable. But to my mind, I as a taxpayer will say, to best of my knowledge, these are not comparable, because even the bioequivalence test says they should be somewhere close, not similar. That's where the range is there. So since it is similar, I will not use it as a cup. If you want to prove it through tests. They are exactly identical, and then I can apply.
In case, I agree with Arun, in case of, especially in the cup method, when you're comparing a branded versus an unbranded product, at that point of time, it becomes very difficult to make that right adjustment, because even your IP, it may be 5 years old, it may be 20 years old, and that itself also gives a different premium to the value of the product. So there again it's a difference. And in the pharma industry, if I'm right, Arun, the API becomes a generic as per the law, after 60 years. So for Crocin, for 60 years will be an API, and after 60 years it becomes a generic product. So in the pharma, you don't know at what stage is the product in that 60 years where it's an API, which we're comparing for the other
Generally,
comparisons.
in the pharma industry, it's 20 years. The
20 years is the
20 years is the patent regime. And also, just based on my experience, that when you say bioequivalent, Cipla also does a bioequivalent. So here the drug that we are talking about is for vertigo, and they are number one in India still. I'm not at the time of the ruling. So Sardia is still a leader in the space, but there are competitors also who are now making inroads. So I think the advantage is basically off patent and patented. So they had the initial mover advantage because of the patent and off patent.
I'm coming back to the fundamental point. Can you put a hand on your heart and tell me that this generic product is exactly identical to the branded product? Exactly identical? No. No. Answer is clearly no. Okay? Because you have not done that test, and it's like a simple thing. Why should I keep scouting for an alternative source when I have my in-house source which I have already prepared? Okay, I have a process, I have a technology to manufacture a particular product. I use that technology, and for using that technology, I need to buy a particular raw material. So unless I can say that exactly identical raw material can be found, I will not use the product. So maybe we can park this and have an offline conversation. I think otherwise, yes. Everyone will start building slopes.
Friends, with this I am concluding my presentation. There are two judgments but that you can read, not much of giving much value to our discussion. Friends, maybe in the next session we will take up these methods, various methods, and again we will have a very deliberate discussion on the subject. I really thank Arun and other members for very interactive session. Otherwise, I thought if I start, I don't know what to add. If I was all alone to contribute, I wouldn't have contributed so much, and the presentation would have been over within half an hour. But yeah, so thanks. Come again next time, and we'll have more discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah. Right.
I think we're missing a month, right? We're missing a session. It's in June now, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I didn't do anything.
No, that's not the case.
Yeah, even I have to. Sure.
I'll take down your number. You have to be here all the time.
स्पीकर्स को कौन उठाता है?
मैंने दिया ना. आज कन्वीनर ही नहीं है कोई. It will take time. Take the subject. इसमें so idea is to pull out such beautiful